Let's head south now, where the massive success of the Extreme Fighting Championship mixed martial arts promotion in South Africa has attracted the attention of the market giant, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. CGTN's Sias Plessis now explores the mixed martial arts boom across the continent.
He came out on top, and that's the true sign of a champion.
The Extreme Fighting Championship has come a long way in the space of a decade and has managed to secure a very good position in MMA globally in that time. The organization boasts over 15 million television viewers with each event and is cultivating talent that is attracting attention from the Ultimate Fighting Championship, who are embracing their African champions.
Businesses like the UFC will look at EFC and go, okay, well, that's a territory right now that, we can keep an eye on, but they are interested in it because Africa is the hot ticket. It's got Usman, Adesanya, we've got all these guys in the UFC now that are from African descent, and they're making huge noise. I promise you, 5 years ago, that wasn't the case.
The organization that boasts a stacked men's and women's division is changing lives through providing athletes with a chance to make a living, support families, and forge careers in the sport of MMA, which no one thought was possible 10 years ago.
EFC has changed a lot of people's lives, including myself. And coming from a children's home, having nothing, no parents in your life, pushing through, working hard. And when the EFC came about and you became part of the EFC family, they look after you very well. Today I'm a father, husband, all thanks to EFC and the platform they gave me.
When EFC started, MMA was seen as cage fighting and was a tough sell, according to Cartmel. But that has all changed since their first event in 2009, and now, 83 events later, the public perception has changed and there's more interest than ever in MMA.
That perception is long gone. If anything, these guys are the supreme. Conor McGregors of the world have made people know that we can compete with boxing, and boxing is seen as one of the great sports. So absolutely, this is now a sport people recognize, love, and aspire to one day be a part of.
There's a wealth of MMA talent on the African continent, and it's evident in major organizations like the UFC, where Africans hold several titles. But it is South Africa's Extreme Fighting Championship that is giving athletes a platform to showcase their skills. And although it may be perceived as a stepping stone to the UFC, Africa's premier MMA organization has enjoyed enough success in its 10 years that fighting in an EFC main card has become something many fighters aspire to. Sias Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Right now, and for more on combat sports in Africa, we're now joined by Gareth McClellan, a former EFC middleweight champion and now a mixed martial arts coach in Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, the Extreme Fighting Championship in South Africa, Gareth, has definitely been a leading light in mixed martial arts. What can the rest of the continent borrow from its success?
Well, I think it's a few things. I think their professionalism, I think the way they've gone about in structuring the organization, the platform that they've created for fighters on this continent. 10 years ago, there was no path towards the UFC. There was no ability to make a life in MMA at all, and they made that possible. They developed a group of fighters in the early days that really established the sport for them. They got behind them. They gave them incredible support. It grew from strength to strength. It eventually created a channel to the largest platform in the world, in the UFC. And we've had a few fighters who've gone through those ranks. We've got a current fighter in there now, Don Madge. We have a chap from the DRC in Champion Dolce. And there are a few more guys knocking on the door, which is incredible for us. It was a hard road in the beginning, but now we're in a space where guys can really see a future for themselves. They can work hard, they can invest, and they can get to the heights that any of the superstars in the UFC are at the moment. With guys like Israel Adesanya and Kamaru Usman, who are now champions in the UFC, it just shows that Africa is capable of producing the level of fighter and then also competing there as well.
And speaking of fighters like Usman, like Israel Adesanya, why are African fighters making such an impact in mixed martial arts, not just in the EFC, but also, like you mentioned, in the UFC, in Bellator and One Championship?
Well, I think Africa is a tough continent. I think we bred very tough. I think we have a fighting spirit. I think it goes back centuries in many of the cultures. So that warrior gene is around. It's in them. When it comes to a combat scenario, they don't fear that environment. In terms of physicality and athletic ability. You know, if you just look at some of the guys in North Africa, they're massive human beings, and they have this ability. And then couple that with the right environment, the right people around them, the right coaches, they're able to become some serious contenders.
And obviously, MMA has enjoyed a big couple of years in the past. Is it now a threat to a sport like boxing? And should more African boxers be now considering a move to the MMA?
Well, I think if we look at the depreciation of boxing over the last 10 years and then the rise of MMA, I would actually say that MMA is the forerunner. I would say it's no longer that boxing is the prime combat sport in the world. I'd say MMA has taken that away from them. In terms of prize money, I think we are led by guys like Floyd Mayweather, but there's not many guys out there that are making that kind of money. In fact, I don't think there's anybody that writes his own check the way that Floyd did, and it kind of gives you a false sense of what is possible. You know, UFC has created a platform where guys are now starting to write big checks and are starting to really become wealthy in themselves. You look at a guy like Conor, he's the guy leading the pack, but he's not the only one out there. I think there's a few big names behind him that are doing exceptionally well. In terms of the growth and the way that MMA is touching everywhere in the world, I think MMA has taken a step forward and really put its hand up. I think it's exciting, it's fast, it's exhilarating, it's different to boxing. Taking nothing away from boxing. Boxing is an exceptional sport. It's been around for 100 plus years, and we've seen some great fighters come through there. We would never want to take away from that, but I think it's the next evolution in combat sports. I think it's where combat sport is going to go, and you're going to see how much MMA is going to change as well as it develops, as it gets faster, as the athletes get better, as they get more knowledge, as they get hungrier, they get more at their disposal. The game just gets quicker, and it's gonna really become something very exciting, I believe, and it already is.
Finally, Gareth, very quickly, why is it that Africa has been unable to commercialize combat sport despite it being part of the continent's culture for so long in countries like Senegal?
I think it's just a case of the ability to expose it to the world and expose African combat sports to the world. I think financially it hasn't had the backing that it could have had. I think it hasn't had the professionalism that it should have had. I think a lot of these guys are guys who are just natural ability and natural athletes, and like I said, they in Africa is a natural warrior gene that they have. I think with the growth of MMA and the growth of sport now, you know, the professionalism is starting to come. Guys are starting to understand what is needed of them to become successful, and you'll see it change slightly as it goes. It's an evolution of things. I think it's in most sports in Africa. Unfortunately, we suffer from the resources to expand. We have all the talent in the world. We just don't have the resources that the rest of the world do.
All right, Gareth, thank you very much for speaking to us here on Sports Scene. Gareth McClellan, former EFC middleweight champion, speaking to us live there from Johannesburg.